All right, we are live now. Jack, thanks for taking the time to sit down and hang out with me on this. Is actually my inaugural blab. For those who are following and may not know me, I'm actually a channel sales manager for Zebra Technologies. We manufacture solutions for shop floor manufacturing, T&L, healthcare, retail solutions for hardware and software solutions, I should say. But my goal in putting this blab together and working with Jack to do so has really been trying to help partners, my reseller partners, really differentiate themselves when they're out talking with end user customers, or the end user customers are trying to get an end user customer's attention. So Jack, I guess I'm sure most people here obviously are well aware of you, but do you want to say something to kind of introduce yourself? I know you recently switched roles. Some people maybe see that creation agency, logo in the background and wonder, hey, what's up?
Yeah. So, I was lucky to have, 2.5 good years at Acton Software. Been in sales for about 12 years. And to be completely honest, I just love social and I love sales. So I've just kind of had a passion and made it my mission to, take the fluff out of, social selling conversation and like put some processes to it. And, have had a lot of success, with Acton, and now I've put together, full training programs for B2B on, the different processes, how they could take social, infuse that into the sales process to get a result, right? Because if you're not getting a result, there's, I always say, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right?
Yep, I've heard you say it before. So I guess, all your experience over the past couple of years, at Acton, utilizing social. I mean, you started, I think I've heard you say you started with LinkedIn without really exactly maybe knowing what you were going to do. You're just trying to utilize LinkedIn to differentiate yourself and maybe uncover some new prospects. I mean, obviously that helped you, I'm assuming, get the role that you're in now. You kind of parlayed it into that new role.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you that I've built a pretty good personal brand, which has helped me in my career, to take on a role with one of the top, digital agencies in Europe and, become the vice president of the company, 50 employees. Social's got me there, but, social I've been adding little pieces at a time. Like you were saying, the first social channel I ever used was LinkedIn when I worked for a manufacturing company, which was like the most laggard industry in the world, right? You couldn't even Google to find their websites. So, I originally got on LinkedIn maybe, 5 years ago, I think, and I was just using it to, prospect. And when I say prospect, not like engage or do, the things that I'm doing today with the amount of people that are on social that are active. I was just looking to find locations, right? Because I was in outside sales. I had 5 states. I couldn't find them on Google. So where else do you find them? And it just so happened that LinkedIn, a lot of them had made LinkedIn accounts. They weren't very active, but I ended up closing a lot of business because of that, just by knowing where they were, right? So I could actually show up to the physical location in the most simple form. That was how I started social selling.
Well, so I guess, I don't say hold that thought, but I know we'll get back to that. But, I've seen reports talking about, if you are, if you're utilizing social media, social selling, however you want to say it, that your production could be 70% higher than maybe your peers that aren't using social selling or social media strategies to, as you said, in LinkedIn, find out who the individual is or where the people are located, where the company is located, but maybe also to, start to create that content. So I guess your thoughts on that real quick, and then maybe taking it to the next step, how did you get to the point where you said, okay, I've found the customers. Now I think I can use LinkedIn to maybe engage with them.
So, LinkedIn's tough, right? Like I always tell people, like there's social selling is not LinkedIning. Like LinkedIn is LinkedIning, right? Like it's a very stagnant platform. It takes a long time, in my opinion, to really get like some momentum with LinkedIn. It took me a really long time. So I think that, where most people go wrong is that they've got to be on all social channels, right? You need to be, Twitter I always called like the gateway of conversation. Most people don't understand the value of Twitter, but Twitter is conversational, right? That's what we need in sales. We need conversations. That's it. I mean, that's what social's really good at getting you to, is the conversation. But not only that, but when you get to the conversation, how do you keep the conversation going, right? And this is where value versus ask comes in. So, I always like to give a scenario of the easiest way that I could explain how value works in social selling. If you were in high school and you still live with your mom and you wanted to go stay at your buddy's place, and maybe your mom didn't really like him too much, right? And you knew it was Friday night, and your mom was going to be coming home from work in an hour. If my strategy on that would be, okay, hey, I'm going to go clean my mom's car, right? I'm going to go clean my room, and I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to do 3 things, and I'm going to earn the right to at least be able to ask and give myself a really good shot at getting permission to go over to his house, right? Pretty hard for your mom with the puppy dog face, knowing that you just did all that work for her, right? You added all that value for her, and she's going to say no. But there's always that possibility that your mom's going to say no, just like a buyer, right? So it's not a perfect science, but I can tell you that there's too much, ask in sales, right? We're very selfish. Sales has turned into like just a selfish thing. And it's sad, right? Because I love sales. I've been in sales for 12 years. And I've always had a lot of success in sales. But one thing I've really noticed in the last 3 years is that the digital age has actually, I think, made sales more selfish, right? Because now we think it's this easy way to spam your message or just send a message and ask for something. But really, like, you got to give buyers value outside of your product and services. And if you're not doing that, you're in big trouble. Social allows you to do that, right? Add value that's value for the buyer outside of your product, outside of your services. Example, if your buyer is doing a webinar, right? What's more valuable to your buyer than you sharing that webinar to your network, right? And getting them more signups for their webinar. Because if you think about mindset, now if you're a buyer, you think of that salesperson as your advocate versus, just the sales guy trying to get, or saleswoman trying to get the deal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that comment probably deserves some props for those of you watching. I've heard you talk about before, and I guess I'll let you say it again. But is there a ratio of how much value you provide before you do an ask or before you request of some sort of ask? Because I know I've heard it mentioned before about how many times as a salesperson you think about it. Going back to doing your own sales, or people who are watching, doing sales they've done in the past. How many times do you reach out to your customer when you aren't asking for something, right?
Well, I mean, it's very rare. Like, hold on 1 second here. All right, just had to invite somebody in there. Ask for the link. So, I mean, go through your email inbox if you're in sales. Like, I dare you to do this, right? Go through every single email that you have in your inbox and find one email that you're not asking the buyer for something, right? You want them to get, another meeting. You're asking for the contract. You're asking for something always.
There's an ask, right?
Yep. And so there's a shift where you can take social and, you asking how much value do you need to give your buyer? Well, I don't know, right? I mean, that depends on how social they are. If they're very social, you've got a lot of opportunity to add value to them, right? Now, that's not going to be the case for everyone. But what I can say is that, if you're smart about social, when you go into a deal, you will try to get connected to as many people in that decision-making process as possible, right? And I always say this, look at social value as touches, a sales touch, right? We say like a phone call, called in, that's a touch. You log that CRM, you send an email, that's a touch. Well, you know what? Start thinking of social as touches, right? And the easiest way I can, dumb this down from a process perspective is if you're new to social, you're probably not going to know the value like I do, right? Because I know I could give one really good share on something, get a lot of amplification, and say, okay, I feel like I've just given this person a lot of value. Now I'm going to call, I feel like I've earned the right to ask, right? But if you're new to social, think about this. I always say, before you do anything or ask for anything next, try to give 3 value touches, right?
That's what I was getting. What I was getting at. Those 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So an example. Let's say that you just had a killer call, right? I always say the meeting is won, but as soon as the phone hangs up, the deal's lost, right? Because that's what happens. We run these killer meetings with these prospects, and we're all excited. We run to our manager and we're like, oh man, this one's killer, right? We gave them the revenue gap. We found everything that was wrong and how we're going to fix it, and then your boss goes, okay, what's the timeline? Well, I couldn't get the next meeting because they didn't have their boss's schedule, right? So, I'm going to follow up, Wednesday. Okay. Well, what happens is over time, buyers lose excitement, right? And then they lose even more excitement when Mark and Jack are sending them emails and calling and emails and calling and emails and calling, begging them for something. Well, what if we did this mindset shift and process shift, and we said, okay, phone's hung up. Now I'm going to go send them a tweet and thanking them, right? I'm going to go retweet something of theirs, whether that's personal, or I'm going to go tweet out a piece of their content. And I'm going to do that 3 times so that I'm valuable and visible to them outside of my product and services. And then that 4th touch is going to be a phone call or an email asking them for, the next steps, right?
Right. So basically using that to kind of, you've paid the price of admission, basically. You've earned the right, as you're saying.
Well, it's not even that, right? I mean, I don't think that you're ever going to, you can just add so much value that the buyer's just so excited to do everything for you. But what I could say is that you also have to stay visible, right? Mm-hmm. And visibility is, especially for people on social, is a retweet, share, engage, whatever that is, right? We could make it most simple form. But what happens when you retweet something, right? Your name pops up in their Twitter. What happens when you go on LinkedIn and you like something? Your name pops up. So it's like staying top of mind. I almost call social media is kind of like the new drip campaign for sales, right?
Oh yeah, I like that.
Marketing's got their email drip campaigns that they send out, doing kind of like the content education buyer journey thing. Well, sales, we should be using social as like kind of the value add way, and using our feed as like a drip campaign. And inside that drip campaign are those value touches, right? So we're staying in front of the buyer, we're staying visible, we're staying valuable, and they can't forget about us, right? And we have a pulse on what's going on. I mean, if you really want to get to know your buyers and you want to know what they're doing with their time when they're available, Twitter will tell you a lot about somebody, right? If I know that they're actively tweeting, it's probably a good time to give them a call. I'm guessing they're probably not doing anything that important if they're tweeting, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. You mentioned when we first started this session here, you mentioned something about manufacturing kind of lagging behind, maybe with the use of social or so forth. Is that what you're referring to? Because that was actually going to, if that's what you're referring to, I was going to take that into another direction here.
Yeah, so manufacturing is a really laggard industry, right? I mean, I went to look at my old CEO's LinkedIn page, and I mean, she's a really, really, big pit bull. She does $1 million in business, and she had 4 connections on LinkedIn, and I was one of them, right? And that was like 4 years ago when I worked there. So what I would say with manufacturing, though, is that manufacturing is probably the biggest competitive advantage for social media right now. And the reason I say that is because you might not get all the business now. It might not be huge now. But in the next year, and you're seeing this shift, as people go social, if you can be an early adopter and start to leverage the hashtags for thought leadership and show up every time somebody uses the hashtag for your industry, right? Or you can be the leader of content on LinkedIn, and you can kind of brand yourself now so that when people do finally kind of get it, they go, okay, now we have to go social. We're seeing our bottom line be hurt because we haven't adopted. What happens now is that you're at the forefront and you're so far ahead of everybody else that you will reap major rewards when they start to come over in groves, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, using that same logic, even if hypothetically you're trying to get in with a specific individual at manufacturing company X, or just like company X, and let's say they're not on social, maybe the company is, but that individual isn't. I would think that if you're showing some sort of social love to that organization, you'll probably get some sort of response from the marketing group. At least that may be some sort of, almost like, hey, look, you go to that contact you're trying to really get in with, say, your organization has recognized, some of the things I've done. They're seeing some of the value that maybe I'm providing, at least by sharing thought leading kind of information, those kinds of things. Maybe use that as part of the strategy to get your foot in the door.
Exactly. And there's so many strategies, that you can use with social, right? Like, I don't think that there's truly one way to do social that everybody should do it, right? I mean, every industry is different. All buyers buy differently. I mean, even in the same industry, you'll have different people in how they tweet, or how they communicate, or what kind of content they share. So you never can have a one size fits all strategy. And the other thing is, that I hate when people or executives especially say to me, "Oh, well, my buyers aren't on social." Really? You know, you're not on social, so how the hell do you know if your buyers are on social, right? You wouldn't even know if your buyers are on social because you've never been social. So I already know you're lying to me. B, that there's no way in hell that if a big company, especially if you're prospecting in like to an enterprise company or a company that does millions of dollars, that somebody's not on social in that company, right? And sometimes the best thing to do is to go after the social people, even if they're not the right contact for you. Start to add value and get visible and see what you can do for them. So if you could do enough for them, they can get you to the non-social people, right? So there's always a vehicle, there's always a way, and there's always a contact with an organization that you could strategically approach to get a result.
That's exactly the point I was making. I think you articulated it better than I did, but that's the point I was trying to make. So I guess I'm taking the call or taking the discussion in some respects back to LinkedIn, because I know you're very active in LinkedIn, obviously Twitter as well. But some of the things that you're creating within like the LinkedIn Pulse post, you can create your posts on the blog, I guess the Pulse blog we'll call it. If there's a salesperson out there who is thinking, it sounds good, I need to do something, I should do something. What would you suggest? I mean, is there a few quick steps, at least to dip their toe in the water to say, hey, this is what it's going to take. Is it worth the time? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's ways to get quote unquote quick wins, I think, on social once in a while. But just like anything in sales, nothing, there's no silver bullet in my opinion. Social should be a long-term strategy play, right? And really you should really be focused on whatever industry you're in, right? Like, so I started off in social selling and I started off on LinkedIn, and then somebody had begged me to go on Twitter. They're like, you got to try Twitter. And I'm like, no, only Justin Bieber fans are on Twitter, right? Well, little did I know, right? Like, as I started Twitter, what happens is I used them in collaboration, right? I call them like peanut butter and jelly, because I took a very strategic approach and was focused on what I was going to talk about, right? Which was social selling. I loved social selling. So before I started writing content, I didn't have any content to share. So what I would do is I would go, and there was a software you could use called Topsy that was free, but I would highly suggest that anyone out there would make an investment in BuzzSumo, BuzzSumo. And what I did was I essentially would share daily 5 to 7 articles on LinkedIn and Twitter about social selling. And I shared the hottest topics on social selling and the hottest articles, like, because with BuzzSumo, you can actually see like what has just been released, what's got the most amplification, all that, because you have to become like a master of content for your industry, because content really drives everything that we do now. And a lot of people don't even realize it, right? An executive, you say, where do you get all your information on a daily basis? Well, probably from certain websites. So your day as an executive is driven by content, right? A lot of times it's driven by social content. They just don't even know that. If you can find that content of your industry, use 5 hashtags only, share that on Twitter and share that on LinkedIn. And what happens is, as you start to share some of the best content, people start to look at you as the trusted resource, right? Whether you're writing that content or not, you want people to come to you, because if you're in medical sales and you sell a certain type of medical device, that people know that you always have the best content, the latest content on what's going on in that industry. And essentially they'll start to buy in. That's how you build an audience, right? And especially a targeted audience. You got to stay focused on what content you share. Can't be all over the place. That's where most people go wrong. And once you've done that, right, then you can decide if you want to create your own content or not. That's up to you. But really, that's kind of how you get buy-in. And then how I'll explain this just in a story is, let's say that social media was just a big giant pond, right? And we were all going to go fishing in it. We all have access to the fishing pole, so we could all go to the pond and we could throw in the hook, and we all have a hook that's free. But nobody ever caught any fish with a hook, right? I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but
without the bait, right?
Yeah, right. So But then you have options, right? Then you can either put some, crappy bait on there, and you might catch a carp, but nobody wants a carp, right? Because you can't even eat a carp. It's not, nobody's proud to bring that home. But now whatever bait you put on there is actually going to bring the fish, right? We have targeted lures and targeted bait for a reason, because you're throwing a hook out in the middle of a huge ocean, all kinds of fish, or lake. How do you get the one fish that you want, right? You want to catch marlin? Well, you got to have marlin bait. You've got to throw the bait out there. You've got to do everything right with it. And content should be your bait. And if you do that right, you're consistent, conversations will come to you, right? I always call the fish is the conversation. And as the conversation comes to you, now you have to use your sales ability to move that conversation offline, right?
Well, right. And you made a good point about moving that conversation offline. So I know that's how I started. I started tweeting probably in 2011, primarily for work reasons, and kind of gained a reputation of doing that, and really took it to the next level a year or so ago with the YouTube channel that I created and so forth. And I can, speaking for myself, selfishly, I guess, is I know the difference is made as far as awareness with people within my industry and their perception of me. So if you're using, if you're out trying to sell yourself, sell your product, what Jack mentioned about, personal branding, I mean, that's huge. So basically, Jack, what you said is, if you don't have content yet, there's places out there to find content to share. For instance, if you're calling on a CIO at an organization, at one of your customers, and you're trying to get their attention, there's, CIOtoday.com. I'm making that website up, but something like that. You can find what are the key things that CIOs, what keeps them awake at night. Good content to share, and then taking that to the next step. If you want to create some of your own content, a blog or what have you, I mean, that's the next step then.
Yeah, I mean, it's all everything's got to be targeted, right? It's got to be revenue focused, buyer focused. And when I say revenue focused, I mean, the bait, right? You've got to have the right content. It's got to be consistent. It's got to be quality too, because where I see like most people go wrong on Twitter, 95%, is that they share all this content, but this is content that everybody's already read, or it's already been, it's old news, right? So if you know your industry's content, well, this comes to being the expert of your field, right? Content has become kind of the new thing that you have to be the expert on. So if you know the content in your industry that well, it makes it really, really easy for you to become the thought leader, because 99.9% of the people in your industry don't really know what's going on with the content. So you could use that as your competitive advantage and give it some time, give it consistency, and you'll start to see those fish, looking at that hook a little bit more and more and more. And the more, the next thing you know is now they're biting the hook. And now you got to pull, if you're a good fisherman, just because they bite the hook doesn't mean anything. But now you've got to figure out, okay, is it the right time to move this person offline? And there's different ways to do that, right? Like with Twitter, what I love to do is I love to get in a little conversation, a little engagement, and I tweet back and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go add you on, just to give you a heads up, I'd love to add you on LinkedIn and follow you, so I could share your industry leading thought leadership, whatever that is, right? And I'll move Twitter into LinkedIn connection, right? Personalized. Hey, great. Thanks for sharing my stuff on Twitter. Great engagement. I'd love to be able to share, more of your content to my audience. And I'm going I can do that pretty fast, right? Especially like a CIO. I can get an executive. If I share an executive's piece of content that he wrote or she wrote, and I tweet that, share that on LinkedIn, I'm giving myself like multiple ways to get them to see who I am, which is visible. They know I'm valuable because I'm sharing their message, right? We all fight to get people to share and get more visibility. And then I can use that to move over to the other channel, right? Because if I'm connected on multiple channels of social surround, now I'm going to be valuable and visible to them, not just on LinkedIn, but now I'm on Twitter. And the next thing you know, you have enough conversations. It's such a natural thing, I think, with social after a certain time, that you feel like you even know some people. I mean, there's VPs of sales that I've had conversations with in the last week that over the last 3 months have shared my content on social selling. And I literally sent a message on Twitter and I'm like, hey, I love that you're sharing all this stuff for me. Like, I would love to have a conversation with you just to figure out why do you share my stuff? Like, I want to know, what intrigued you. And I just go into a straight, natural conversation. And, maybe there's a sales pitch if needed, if I see a business need, or maybe not, right? Because I know that you got to build relationships now so that, when they're ready in the future, you're going to be the first one they call.
Well, right. No, I think that's a great point. And it's, if you think back how you and I started talking, that's kind of how I engaged you, even just to plan this discussion that we're having right now, over the past month or two. That's kind of how it all unfolded.
Well, and if you, think about social as this as well. So I wrote an article the other day about reactive versus proactive, in your sales process or in sales. And when we're on a sales call and we're asking for something, we set the appointment, we go into the call with the buyer, we ask a bunch of discovery questions, and then our job is to figure out what their needs are, right, and how we can fix their problem. That's a reactive type of sales pitch, right? Because they're giving us information, and then we're coming back and we're giving them a solution, and from a sales perspective. And then, you're going to go to the next step, and everything you do is going to be reactive to the buyer. Well, social is a great way to be proactive, right? If you want a prospect or you want to go into an account or you want to get a conversation offline, why don't you proactively start to get visible and valuable now? And maybe it's 3 months from now, but in 3 months, if you do get that appointment, imagine if that buyer and you had engaged 3-4 times, shared each other's stuff. When you get on that phone call, you're halfway through the sales process now, right? You might have had to be a little bit more patient, but you're going to be at a lot better spot if you do that, and you do that in the numbers, right? Like, I'm a numbers guy. I like to have as many conversations on social as possible because I know that instant gratification is something that's not happening in sales anymore. So I would rather just enjoy people, be targeted about it, have natural conversations, and actually get to know people on a more personal level, which is kind of lost in sales. Because I can't tell you how many conversations that have started and how many sales I've closed that I'd started the conversation 6 months prior proactively, and then reactively they were ready to buy. They reached out to me because they had already known what I was all about, and I'd actually become an advocate to them for sales when I got on the phone. Made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I would say that's good advice. It kind of goes back to something you said earlier as well about drip marketing kind of being top of mind. It took a while to build that relationship. You're using the term 3 to 6 months or whatever it might be, but it took a while to build that rapport to the point where you could take that conversation offline. And actually, let's go back to the beginning, because maybe I should have asked you this at the very beginning. But what is your definition of social selling? That should have been like the first thing I asked you right out of the gates. But we kind of got started in other direction. But what is your definition of social selling? Just so people watching can get a feel for what you think.
So my short definition is just simply leveraging social and infusing it into the traditional sales process or whatever sales process you have now to add enough value that you create more conversations, better conversations, which lead to more opportunities, and obviously lead to more revenue, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're playing numbers in sales, it all starts with conversations. And the phone, I mean, I guess I would love to hear other people's feedback, but I can tell you, if you're just playing the ringtone game, you're in big trouble. And if you're playing the give me email game, you're in big trouble with just those two strategies, right? I mean, you've got to have a full channel strategy in sales today, and that strategy has got to be sales calls, value touches. You've got to have a really good mix of things going on, but you've always got to have a lot of conversations going. However you can get those on whatever channels you can get those, because of the simple fact that conversations stuff your pipeline.
No, I think that's great because I'd love to know how many salespeople out there, and I've asked this rhetorically to some of my customers, but and my customers are our resellers who are selling our products and our solutions. But I've how many people are happy with what they're getting as far as responses when they're trying to introduce themselves or make inroads at a new customer, or even just go deeper and wider within the same customer. I guess the whole thing goes back to what people say. If you're happy with what you're getting, why change? Or, you're going to get what you're going to get. What's that saying?
Well, so you bring up a good point. Like, I hear, I get exactly what you're saying. But like, if I go in and talk to a VP of sales or a sales rep and they don't believe in social media or social selling, I say, okay, did you hit your numbers last quarter? Yes. Okay, perfect. Don't worry about it. Don't fix anything that's not broken. Like, there's some salespeople that will always be good on the phone, or where at Acton, there was one sales rep that I know that literally was never on the phone, but was closing deals over email. I mean, he was like the master of email, right? And it worked for him. And why would you change anything if it's working? Like what I'm talking about with social selling is there's three people I'm talking to. One is the sales rep that just can't close deals and not hitting their quota, right? They're not getting enough conversations. Their pipeline's not full. They can dial. I would say that you've got to dial. You've got to pick up the phone. You got to do some cold calling, but you've got to block off time for social as well, right? I think that a lot of executives or sales leadership is scared of that. So that people are sales reps are kind of scared to do the social thing, right? Because they don't have any training. They don't understand it. They know that there's value there. And the most important thing is they don't want to get in trouble, right? Nobody wants to say anything that would get them in trouble with the organization. People just don't understand that aspect of social, right? That it's just like you and I having this conversation. There's no difference. If you wouldn't say it to your grandma, just don't say it online, right? But social selling is, well, let me start. So for the rep that's not hitting their quota, for the sales rep that is hitting their quota but wants to just murder their quota, right? And wants to plan for the future. And then the third element is somebody that wants to not just be an employee for the rest of their damn life. I loved Acton, and Acton gave me a lot. But you know what? I didn't want to just be a sales rep at Acton for the rest of my life. How was I going to excel and go to that next step in my career without anybody knowing who I was, without having high-level connections, without connecting with influencers who have become my mentors that I've met all on social? There's very many components outside of sales or social selling. I think social selling, to me, is selling yourself to other people that are at the top at a level that you want to be, that you aspire to go to. You can't just connect with those people anywhere else. Social is a really, really good place to give them enough value so that they'll give you that value back and mentor you and help you with your career and advice and things that a lot of people don't have access to.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And you kind of mentioned, we're talking about having as many conversations as you can at one time. And that's kind of like, filling the funnel in another way. Maybe it's a separate, parallel funnel before something actually begins or turns into an opportunity. But how about, if you're a sales rep and you're calling let's say you've got an organization, you're more of an account manager, I should say, and maybe you're calling on customers who you've already been called on. You're looking to go maybe deeper and wider, but you're not looking to go for a new customer. So you're calling on your current account base versus utilizing social for calling on new customers. The hunting versus the farming, kind of those kind of areas. Yeah. Do you think social is better in one scenario versus the other?
No, I think social should be in every scenario, because where a lot of people go wrong is they think of social as prospecting. In my opinion, social is like not prospecting, right? Like prospecting is collecting data towards a targeted buyer. Like we all know that we have to do that, right? I mean, that's just like common sense of sales. But it's, social selling is actually taking that data and doing the right things for the buyer, where it's buyer focused, so that, you can actually earn the right to their time and their business, right, over a period. And social never stops in the sales process, right? There's value touches. I call it value touches. So it starts at the beginning and before the appointment's set. When the appointment's set, you start to do your value touches before you get on that meeting. Get connected with every single decision maker you could possibly get connected with before you have that first meeting on social, right? I want to triangulate. Like there used to be this, this old traditional model in sales was, go above the line, right? Like you get the middle of the line person and then you have to go above them. Well, not anymore. I mean, you should be connected with, or at least working on a strategy to get connected with all the major decision makers that you can find on social before you get that meeting. And then after that meeting, you should be figuring out how you can, what you listen to, how you could add value, and how you can touch them, give them value touches until the next meeting, right? And then you have the next meeting, and what content did I hear? What did I hear was a gap that maybe they didn't really feel too confident on me. I said this, but I don't feel like they were completely sold. Mm-hmm. Well, go get a piece of content, get the data behind what you said, back it up, and send it over, right? And then you go to the next meeting, and then it's proposal time. Perfect. Proposal time. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, if it's proposal time and the CEO tells me his favorite restaurant, guess what he's going to get the next day before I ask him for the proposal? He's going to get his favorite meal that he just tweeted out about, right? So, I mean, there's all these creative ways you can do that. Now, you talk about the current customer. What is better than being connected with your current customers and listening to what's going on in the organization? Oh, you guys just got 42 million more in funding. Oh, congratulations. I'm going to share that. Oh, but hey, by the way, I know that we had talked about, kind of taking you guys to the next level. Budgets were a concern, right? That's a great time to have that conversation. Leverage social, do things for your buyer along the journey. One of the best methods I always had at Acton was my customers came first on social, right? I had, Twitter lists with all my customers, and I had followed and was connected and, made a list in Navigator, LinkedIn Navigator of all my current customers. And I was always looking to see what was going on with them, right? Because if they had a webinar, I was sharing that webinar, because when I sold them that deal, my commitment to them was that I was going to be an advocate for them, no matter, what was going on, as long as they were a customer. It didn't just stop because I closed the deal. And what's funny? I can't tell you how many just great relationships, and actually, since I've left Acton, customers that have called me and still want to do business with me, right? Because of you. Because I'm still an advocate for them.
Oh, so yeah,
so hopefully that.
Yeah, it does. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but because they felt you were being authentic and obviously had their best interests at heart, and a lot of times in sales, it's looked at a win-win. I mean, you want to be a win for the customer, you want to be a win for the salesperson.
Well, I mean, how many salespeople are proactively helping out their buyers, right? I mean, you can't just sell people a deal or ask them for their time just for to show them a demo or to get the next meeting. I mean, think about this. Like, people, I hate, I love the term people buy from people to a certain extent, but people don't just buy from people. People buy from people that have done something for them, right? That they're bought into. And fixing a business problem, I'm not sold that that's really the job of a salesperson solely anymore, right? Maybe it was back in the day where we kind of had all the, we could kind of like hold on to the collateral, right? We could hold on to all the secrets of what their competitors were doing, but the internet's taking that away from sales. So if you want to stand out in sales, and I always think about this when I get off a sales call, I always go, if I was the buyer, would I remember Jack? Was Jack memorable? Not was Jack a good salesperson? Did Jack fix my business, problems? I always think, if I got off the phone with Jack right now, would I be so inspired by Jack and so excited about Jack that I would go tell my boss how much I like Jack? Not how much I like Jack's product, how much I like Jack. Because if I can get him or her to do that, and go to their boss and say, I really like Jack, they've already sold the product for me. Now, if they go and they say, I like the product, I'm still got an uphill battle. I want them to like me, and social is another piece of that I can add into the process to get them to buy into me.
Well, I think that's good, and especially when there's metrics out there that talk about end users are 60% of the way through the buying process, or the decision-making process before they engage a salesperson. The strategies and the ideas that you're sharing throughout this last half hour or so are will really kind of qualify for being a way to stay top of mind. That drip that you mentioned earlier on. I mean, that's good. I mean, in my industry, I think that's huge, because I see that where a lot of times where salespeople, they're competing for the mind share of that end user, and there's a lot of competitors out there. I mean, it's a competitive world.
The only way you stand out with noise is the only people that stand out from the noisy digital world are the ones that add a shizload of value. Right? And that's why you see the same people get the most amplification on social media, because those are the people that are value focused, right? Versus my message focused, selfishly focused. I mean, 90% of people on social only tweet something that drives traffic to their website. They only tweet something that drives leads to their landing pages. There's very few that write content that doesn't talk about their product, doesn't talk about what they do, and is straight buyer focused, right? Value focused. And on top of that is buyer focused on being an advocate for the buyer versus just trying to get something out of them. And you can see that on LinkedIn. You can see the people that get massive amplification. Go analyze what they do on social. And what they do is they never sell, and they always stay ahead of the curve. They understand the industry better than anybody in that industry when it comes to content and innovation. And they know content so well that they know what's value versus noise. And most people can't figure that out yet, or are too lazy to figure that out.
Well, that's good advice. And just, trying to keep things concise here. Let me ask you a question. So going back to the whole manufacturing being a laggard, industry potentially within social, if you're a sales rep and, maybe your contacts, your prospects are on LinkedIn, whether the company is or is not, but I mean, can you give an idea of a way to engage with the prospects? You mentioned, adding valuable content, but just kind of recap that as we're probably coming to the end here. Then my next question was going to be to maybe share a couple of valuable tools that you think that, sales reps should be using. So make it maybe a two-part question there.
Okay, so let's say, let me give you a competitive hack that I think for social engagement for a laggard industry. Go after the influencers in the industry. All influencers of every single industry are on social, right? Because those are the ones that are writing content about the industry or staying up to date. Go build a relationship with the influencers of the industry, especially if you're in manufacturing. Go figure out how you can get into their network, how you can learn from them, and not only that, how you can add enough value to them that they'll give you access to their network of buyers that already trust them. And those buyers are the CEOs that aren't on social. Because what the CEO is doing is he knows they're his pulse. They're the influencers are the ones that he's paying money to consult him, to tell him what to buy, why to buy it. They're the gatekeeper almost. Influencers have become like the gatekeepers. These consultants or high-end influencers / consultants. They're the ones that are actually, when you are going into the decision-making process and it's down to the final two and you're in a competitive deal, who do you think they're going to, right? They're going to the influencer of that industry and saying, hey, we're looking at solution A, we're looking at solution B. What's your experience? Which one should we buy?
Yeah, that's it.
If you have those people on your team, you can now go to one person who's going to take you to multiple buyers versus you going and trying to get them on your own. Right. That's how you can really use social in sales.
I think that's awesome. That's like that could be like the golden nugget right there. So how about maybe some tools for somebody who's not on social or thinking I should start utilizing it, or some tools that you think other than LinkedIn, Twitter, but I'm sure those are obviously tools you would recommend. But you mentioned a couple other tools earlier.
So the first one is Twitter. For Twitter, I would say it's free. My favorite tool. It's called Crowdfire. So with Crowdfire, once you build your Twitter account, you can actually go into Crowdfire and you can copy followers of your competitors, right? Or you can copy a list of the people that follow the hashtag for your industry. If you're in technology or, even manufacturing, right? Like you might be laggard, but I'll tell you what, go use Crowdfire and put in the hashtag manufacturing and it'll identify those influencers. You'll be able to see who the influencers are, the ones that get the most engagement. On top of that, you'll be able to identify, who's active on that hashtag so that you can start to get your first list of people that are social, right? That you should start to get engaged with.
Good point.
And then the other thing is you can build, and then you can follow those people, right? So I always say go on Crowdfire daily and make it a habit to follow targeted people, right? 100 to 200 people. That's how you kind of build your Twitter following. And then you go get Buffer, which is free. And Buffer will allow you to automate your posts. And the other thing that Buffer does that's really cool is if you've got websites in your industry that that you follow, that kind of have like the innovative content and the most up-to-date stuff, you can actually set up RSS feed and pull their RSS feed in so that it'll automatically pull in those articles and those tweets and tweet those out for you in an automated fashion, right? So that's where you kind of stay top of mind with the hottest content. And buffer is really easy. I mean, it won't take you very long to figure that out. But those are probably the two most simple but powerful tools that you can use to get started with social selling.
Well, I think that's good. You know what? It's funny because we were talking before, and you mentioned the term cold calling. There's a lot of sales reps out there that have. It's getting a funny echo. Not sure what's caused. There's sales reps out there that have a fear of rejection, or they don't like cold calling. I mean, I worked at a place years ago where every Monday afternoon, 3 hours, you were cold calling. And this is a while ago. So I mean, this is before all the technology that we've had over the past 10 years or so. But the point is that, social really would allow you to almost, I'm going to say, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to say eliminate cold calling to a certain extent, because it becomes warm though. If you can build a bit of a rapport.
Yes, but here's where I think people go wrong.
Okay.
Is that everything we do in sales is about conversations, right? And unfortunately, social is online and it's not offline. So it's not technically, the right conversation to like stuff your pipeline with, right?
Well, correct, yeah.
So I truly believe that social is your proactive cold calling and kind of, conversation pipeline stuffing to get to the offline conversation, which is where you can really officially make it, part of your pipeline, right? But cold calling has to be a strategy, and I'll tell you, it has to be a strategy for sales reps that don't have a network, right? I mean, the most successful sales reps of any industry are ones that have a network, right? Most top sales reps work off referrals. Plain and simple, I don't care what anybody says. You don't have a sales rep that's been in sales for 20 years that's still pounding the phone cold calling, right? But they did do that for a long time before they got to the point where they had a network that was big enough that it could self-generate and give them what they needed to hit their number, right? So new sales reps with a small network, very little opportunities, and a really crap pipeline, and ones that just can't hit quota. I mean, it's got to be part of your strategy, because if you don't have it, I just don't see how you would ever get to quota, right?
Right. No, that's good. And, I was thinking of a way of, not necessarily eliminating cold calling, but the point where you just warm it up. So it's not so cold anymore. It's lukewarm, warm, whatever it might be. So,
well, yeah, I mean, and I think that there is strategy around that, right? I mean, I don't cold call. I'll be completely honest with you, but I also don't have to cold call, right?
Yeah.
I put enough work into what I've done in my time in sales and my network, right? I would say if you're in sales, focus on your network. Like, build your freaking network. Get your network as big and powerful as you possibly can. And I'll tell you, social will get you there a lot faster than any other methods. I mean, you'd be broke if you just tried to build that through conferences, right? You'd be really, really hard fit to just cold call influencers. I mean, I have Mike Weinberg, one of my favorite, sales guru guys and sales leadership. I've made a joke with him the other day because he told me to call him, and even when he told me to call him, he didn't answer his dang phone, right? So, but use social to your advantage to build your network, but use everything. Like, become the master of every channel in your industry, and trust me, if you're buyer focused, you do the right things, you put in the work, and you on all channels, you're visible and valuable on all channels, phone, email, social, wherever that is, things will work out. It won't happen overnight, but it'll work out if you make that commitment.
All right. Well, it's another avenue, like you said. And I guess just prior to wrapping things up, one of the things I did in kind of preparation for us chatting today was, I shared with, a lot of my contacts and my customers, and, again, my customers are our reseller partner base. But, a LinkedIn post that you wrote about, the 3-step process for infusing social slowly. So I'm going to, any thoughts on that? I don't think you wrote that all long ago, but would you write that exact same thing today, or has your feelings changed a little bit?
No, I think that, baby steps, if you're not getting training for your company, by the way, plug if you want some, I can help you with that. But if you're not getting training from your company, which most, companies don't even do regular sales training, right? Let's be honest. Then you've got to dig deep as a sales rep. Take responsibility and start consuming, become a connoisseur of content. I'm self-taught for the most part. I learned this stuff because, you know why? Because I have a passion for social and I have a passion for sales. And, I love what I do. I loved what I did at Acton. If you love your product, you love your industry, you've just got to become obsessed with consuming so much information about that industry that there's nobody that could tell you something that you don't already know.
That's good. I was saying you can tell you've got the passion, so I think it's good. Jack, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you taking time to sit down with me, kind of plan this out, and we kind of put this together over the past month or so. I know that I've shared your information with some of the people that I work with in the marketing groups of some of my reseller customer base. So especially over the past week or so since you switched jobs, 2 weeks or so. But anyways, I do appreciate your time, Jack. Is there anything else that you want to say? Anything else you want to say when you're wrapping things up?
No, I mean, I'd love for anybody that watches this that's in your network or partners, reach out, tweet to me. I did just write a publish last week where I opened up my calendar, opened up 2 hours on Fridays, and until it's booked up full, which it's almost there. But book time, I'll spend 15 minutes with you. Won't talk about me at all. Tell me what problems you're having, what questions you have, and I'll see if I can help.
All right. Well, I know I'm in a meeting tomorrow with the marketing group within one of my reseller customers, and we're going to chat about this. So that's awesome.
Well, it's in there, so you can book whatever time works for you, Mark. You're always welcome to my calendar.
All right, Jack, that's awesome. Thanks for your time.
All right, man. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.